The rain had been falling for hours when 12-year-old Ethan Walker stood alone outside a small grocery store in rural Ohio. His hoodie was soaked. His shoes squished with every step. He clutched a torn backpack against his chest while people rushed past him without making eye contact. Most of them thought he was just another kid waiting for a ride home. None of them knew he hadn't eaten since the day before. None of them knew he was terrified to go back to the motel room where his mother lay sick in bed, pretending everything was fine while unpaid bills piled up beside her. And none of them noticed the elderly woman sitting quietly in the parking lot, watching Ethan with tears forming in her eyes. What happened next would change not only Ethan's life, but the lives of an entire town. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from and one act of kindness you'll never forget. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone forever. Ethan had always believed life would get better eventually. His father used to say that storms never lasted forever. But his father had been gone for almost 3 years now. One winter morning, he left for work and never came home after a highway accident covered the roads in ice. After that, everything changed. His mother, Rachel, tried to stay strong. She worked double shifts at a diner outside town while Ethan learned how to cook cheap meals, wash clothes at the laundromat, and stay quiet whenever she cried at night. At first they managed. Then Rachel got sick. The doctors said it started as pneumonia, but without enough rest and proper treatment, her condition worsened. She missed too many days of work. Bills stacked higher every week. Eventually they lost their apartment. Now they lived in a faded roadside motel near the interstate. The kind of place where neon lights buzzed all night and strangers argued through thin walls. Ethan hated it there. But he hated seeing his mother ashamed even more. That rainy Thursday evening, Rachel handed Ethan $20 and asked him to buy soup, bread, and medicine from the grocery store. "Only get what we absolutely need," she whispered weakly. Ethan nodded. He always nodded. Because when adults are breaking apart, children learn to become quiet. Inside the grocery store, Ethan carefully counted every dollar twice. He carried generic soup cans and discount bread through the aisles while silently calculating taxes in his head. When he reached the pharmacy section, he stared at the medicine shelf. The cough medicine his mother needed cost more than he expected. His stomach tightened. He removed the bread from his basket. Then the soup. Finally he stood there holding only the medicine. His mother needed it more than food. The cashier scanned the bottle. $23.74, she said. Ethan froze. He counted the money again. $20 exactly. I thought it was cheaper, he whispered. The people behind him sighed impatiently. A man muttered something under his breath. Ethan felt heat rise into his face. "It's okay," he said quickly, reaching for the medicine. "I'll put it back." That's when a soft voice spoke behind him. "No, sweetheart. You won't." Ethan turned around. An older woman with silver hair stepped forward holding a carton of milk and a bouquet of yellow flowers. She smiled gently. "Add the bread and soup back too." Ethan immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am. It's okay." "I know it is," she said softly. "But let me help anyway." The cashier glanced at the woman. "You sure, Margaret?" Margaret nodded. She paid for everything without hesitation. Ethan stood speechless. Nobody had done something kind for him in a very long time. "Thank you," he whispered. Margaret noticed how tightly he held the grocery bag. "Who's sick at home?" she asked carefully. "My mom." Margaret's expression changed immediately. Not pity. Understanding. She asked no more questions. Instead, she picked up the yellow flowers from the counter and handed them to Ethan. "Every room deserves something beautiful," she said. Ethan walked back through the rain carrying medicine, soup, bread, and flowers. For the first time in months, he felt something unfamiliar. Hope. When Rachel saw the flowers, she nearly cried. "Where did you get these?" "A lady bought them." Rachel looked worried instantly. "You didn't ask strangers for money, did you?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "She just helped." Rachel sat silently for a long moment. Then she placed the flowers in an old plastic cup filled with water. "They're beautiful," she whispered. That night, Ethan noticed his mother smiling for the first time in weeks. The next morning, there was a knock at the motel door. Rachel slowly opened it. Margaret stood there holding 2 bags of groceries. Behind her was a tall man in his 40s wearing a denim jacket. "This is my son, Daniel," Margaret explained. "He owns the hardware store downtown." Rachel immediately looked embarrassed. "You really don't have to do this." Margaret smiled kindly. "Sometimes people need help," she said. "And sometimes people need the chance to give it." Daniel stepped forward. "My mom told me about your situation," he said gently. "I know this may sound strange, but I could use help organizing inventory at the store. Nothing too physical. Flexible hours." Rachel looked stunned. "I haven't worked in weeks." "That's okay," Daniel replied. "Start when you feel better." Rachel's eyes filled with tears she tried desperately to hide. That small conversation became the beginning of everything changing. Over the next few weeks, Margaret visited often. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes books from the library for Ethan. Sometimes she simply sat beside Rachel and talked. No judgment. No pity. Just kindness. Ethan learned that Margaret had lost her husband years earlier. She lived alone in a white farmhouse outside town and spent most of her days volunteering at church and helping neighbors quietly. "What made you help us?" Ethan asked one afternoon. Margaret smiled sadly. "Because once, a stranger helped me when nobody else would." She never explained further. But Ethan understood enough. Pain recognizes pain. And kindness often comes from people who know suffering personally. As Rachel slowly recovered, she began working part-time at Daniel's hardware store. The paycheck wasn't huge. But it was enough to leave the motel and rent a tiny apartment above a laundromat downtown. It smelled faintly like detergent all the time, but Ethan loved it immediately. Because it felt like home. One evening after unpacking, Ethan looked out the window at snow beginning to fall over the streets below. Rachel stood beside him quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered suddenly. "For what?" "For all of it." Ethan frowned. "You didn't do anything wrong." Rachel wiped her eyes. "I wanted to give you a better life." Ethan leaned against her shoulder. "You did," he said softly. "You stayed." Rachel broke down crying after hearing those words. Because children don't remember wealth the way adults think they do. They remember love. Months passed. Winter turned into spring. Rachel regained strength. Ethan adjusted to school again after missing many days during the hardest months. But although life improved, Ethan never forgot how invisible he had felt during those dark days. Especially at school. He remembered classmates laughing at his worn shoes. Teachers assuming he was lazy because he looked exhausted. Kids whispering about the motel. Loneliness leaves scars people cannot see. One afternoon during lunch, Ethan noticed a new student sitting alone. The boy looked nervous and avoided eye contact. His clothes were old. His backpack was ripped. Other students ignored him completely. Ethan recognized that look immediately. Without thinking twice, he carried his lunch tray across the cafeteria. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. The boy shrugged awkwardly. "My name's Ethan." "Louis." For the next 20 minutes, they talked about video games, basketball, and movies. Nothing important. Everything important. When lunch ended, Louis smiled for the first time all day. That evening Ethan told Margaret about it. She smiled proudly. That's how kindness spreads, she said. One person chooses not to look away. Ethan thought about those words constantly afterward. Not looking away. It sounded simple. But most people spent their lives doing exactly that. Ignoring lonely people. Avoiding struggling neighbors. Pretending not to notice pain because it felt uncomfortable. Margaret never looked away. And now Ethan didn't want to either. By summer, Ethan started helping Daniel at the hardware store after school. He stocked shelves, swept floors, and carried supplies for elderly customers. One afternoon an older man entered the store looking frustrated. His card kept declining while trying to buy plumbing supplies. People in line grew impatient. The man looked embarrassed. Daniel quietly pretended the register had malfunctioned. Then he leaned closer and whispered, "You're good. Don't worry about it." The man stared in disbelief. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Daniel interrupted gently. After the man left, Ethan asked, "Why didn't you tell him you paid?" Daniel smiled while organizing receipts. "Because kindness doesn't need applause." That sentence stayed with Ethan for years. As months turned into years, the small town slowly changed in ways nobody expected. It started with tiny things. Neighbors leaving groceries on porches anonymously. High school students volunteering at nursing homes. A local barber offering free haircuts once a month for struggling families. Teachers keeping snacks in classrooms for hungry kids. Nobody officially organized it. Kindness simply became contagious. And at the center of it all was Margaret. Though she never asked for recognition. One chilly autumn evening, Ethan visited her farmhouse after football practice. He found her sitting quietly on the porch wrapped in a blanket. "You okay?" he asked. Margaret smiled weakly. "Just tired." But Ethan noticed her hands trembling. Over the next few weeks, she became weaker. Daniel eventually told Ethan the truth. Margaret had heart failure. The doctors didn't know how much time she had left. Ethan felt sick hearing it. The idea of losing Margaret terrified him. She had become family. One Saturday, Ethan sat beside her porch swing watching leaves fall across the fields. "I don't know how to thank you for everything," he whispered. Margaret reached over and squeezed his hand gently. "You already did." "How?" "You survived," she said softly. "And you became kind anyway." Ethan looked down silently. Because she understood something most people never realize. Pain can turn people cold. Or it can make them compassionate. The choice matters. That winter, the town held its annual Christmas festival downtown. Lights covered storefronts. Children laughed while drinking hot chocolate. Music echoed through the streets. Ethan helped Daniel set up booths while Rachel volunteered at the church donation table. But Margaret couldn't attend. She was too weak. Near the end of the festival, Ethan suddenly climbed onto the small stage near the town square. He grabbed the microphone nervously. People turned toward him curiously. "I just want to say something," Ethan began. His hands shook. "A few years ago, my mom and I had nothing. We lived in a motel. Most people never noticed us." The crowd became silent. But one person did. Ethan looked toward Daniel standing near the stage. "Margaret Walker changed our lives with one small act of kindness." People listened quietly. "She bought medicine for my mom when we couldn't afford it. But more importantly, she made us feel seen." Rachel wiped tears from her face. Ethan swallowed hard before continuing. "I think there are people all around us right now who feel invisible. Maybe they're struggling financially. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they just need someone to care. Snowflakes drifted gently through the air. So this Christmas, don't look away. The entire town stood silent for several seconds after he finished. Then applause erupted everywhere. But Ethan wasn't listening to the applause. Because he had already spotted Daniel crying quietly near the back. The next morning, dozens of flowers appeared on Margaret's porch. Then meals. Cards. Letters. Children from local schools made handmade ornaments for her house. Neighbors took turns checking on her daily. For once in her life, the woman who had quietly cared for everyone else finally understood how deeply she was loved. One evening, Ethan visited her again. Margaret looked frail now. But peaceful. I heard the whole town's talking about me, she joked weakly. Ethan laughed softly. You started it? Margaret looked out the window toward falling snow. No, she whispered. Kindness was already there. People just needed reminding. A few weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep. The town mourned deeply. At her funeral, the church overflowed with people. Teachers. Waitresses. Farmers. Students. Cashiers. Single mothers. Veterans. Dozens of people shared stories nobody else had known. She paid my electric bill one winter. She visited my husband every week in hospice. She bought my daughter school supplies. She sat with me after my miscarriage. Again and again, people repeated similar stories. Tiny acts. Quiet acts. Life-changing acts. Ethan realized something profound while listening. Most heroes never become famous. Sometimes the greatest people in the world are ordinary individuals who simply choose compassion over convenience every single day. After the service, Daniel handed Ethan a small envelope. My mom wanted you to have this. Inside was a handwritten letter. Ethan unfolded it carefully. It read, Dear Ethan. If you are reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't waste your life being afraid of broken people. The world teaches us to avoid pain because it feels uncomfortable. But kindness only matters when it costs something. You once asked why I helped you that rainy night. Years ago, after my husband died, I sat alone in a grocery store parking lot wondering how I would survive. I felt invisible too. A stranger bought my groceries and told me, someday, when you can, help someone else. That's all. No speeches. No miracles. Just kindness passed from one person to another. Now it's your turn. Love. Margaret. Ethan cried harder than he ever had before. But something changed inside him after reading those words. He understood now. Kindness travels. Sometimes across generations. Sometimes across decades. One small act can echo farther than anyone realizes. Years later, Ethan graduated high school with honors. Then college. He eventually became a social worker focused on helping homeless families and struggling children. People often asked why he chose such difficult work. He always smiled the same way before answering. Because someone once helped me. One freezing January night nearly 15 years after meeting Margaret, Ethan left his office in Chicago during a snowstorm. As he walked toward the train station, he noticed a young woman sitting outside a convenience store holding a sleeping toddler beneath a thin blanket. People hurried past without stopping. The woman looked exhausted and ashamed. Ethan froze. Suddenly he wasn't 30 anymore. He was 12 again. Cold. Hungry. Invisible. Without hesitation, he approached her. Have you eaten today? He asked gently. The woman shook her head. Ethan bought food, warm clothes, diapers, and medicine for the child. Then he helped connect her with emergency housing through his organization. Before leaving, the woman started crying. Why are you helping me? Ethan looked at the little girl sleeping in her arms. Then he smiled softly. Because someone once helped me. And in that moment, Margaret's kindness lived again. That is the thing about compassion. It never truly disappears. Every act creates another. A ripple becoming a wave. A single candle lighting countless others without losing its own flame. Some people think changing the world requires money, power, or fame. But often it begins much smaller. A conversation with someone sitting alone. Paying for groceries. Checking on a grieving neighbor. Offering warmth to someone the world ignores. Looking at people instead of through them. That's how communities heal. That's how lives change. And maybe right now, somewhere near you, there's someone standing silently in their own storm, praying someone notices them. Maybe they're hiding fear behind a smile. Maybe they're carrying burdens nobody can see. Maybe one small act of kindness could become the reason they keep going. The beautiful thing is this. You never truly know how far your compassion will travel. A sandwich handed to a hungry stranger. A phone call to someone lonely. A few encouraging words to a tired parent. A moment of patience with someone struggling. Tiny things. Massive impact. Because people rarely remember every detail of our lives. But they remember how we made them feel. Ethan never forgot the flowers Margaret handed him in that grocery store. Not because they were expensive. Not because they solved every problem. But because they reminded him that even during the darkest season of his life, someone cared whether he existed. And sometimes, that feeling alone can save a person. So tonight, wherever you are watching from, remember this. Kindness is never wasted. Even when unnoticed. Even when unreturned. Even when the world feels cold. Every act matters. Every compassionate choice leaves fingerprints on another human soul. And long after we are gone, those fingerprints may continue changing lives we will never meet. So hold the door open. Make the phone call. Offer the meal. Speak gently. Forgive freely. Look for the lonely people everyone else ignores. Because somewhere down the road, years from now, someone may tell a story about the moment your kindness changed everything for them. And they may spend the rest of their life passing that kindness forward. That's how ordinary people create extraordinary change. One heart at a time. One choice at a time. One act of kindness at a time. And maybe, the next story begins with you.